Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jonathon Davidson. This is the third summer podcast from Lexolent. That's Lexolent Litigation Funding, Lexolent. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Peter Petyt, who is the principal and founder of Four Rivers. Peter is very long-standing in the litigation finance world, and Peter is currently calling in from the West Coast of America. I'm in Dubai, so we have stretched our days. It's very late at night for Peter. It's quite early in the morning for me, hence my caffeine injection. But Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jono. I don't have caffeine given the hour of the day, but this is a nice herbal tea, so I hope that will sustain me.
That's great. Now, first of all, because you have had a very interesting career, you are sort of one of the thought leaders in litigation finance and all the good stuff that goes with that. Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your career, the twists and turns, and where it's led you to?
Sure. I'll try to give the abbreviated version. I'm a finance person by background. I trained as a chartered accountant in London, and then spent a number of years in industry before getting into corporate finance, essentially helping companies to raise capital or to buy and sell other companies as an advisor, which I started in around 2001. And then I stayed in that field for a number of years, probably about 12, 13 years, working mainly for accountancy firms, actually, both in London and in the Middle East. I was based in Bahrain for a couple of years back in 2010. Which gave us some interesting insight into international deals, and particularly the GCC region. We returned to London when there was some unrest in Bahrain, and I took up another corporate finance role, during which time I was approached by a client who was looking for strategic advice. It was a family business in the legal services sector. One thing led to another, and they asked me to go and run that business, which was in the legal cost space. Yeah. The idea was to build that business and to prepare it for a buyout. And so we did a number of things. We did some acquisitions. We did a lot of business development. We put an IT strategy in place. And then I was going to lead the buyout. Actually, it didn't proceed because the family decided not to go ahead with the sale, which I always take as a bit of a backhanded compliment, because I think they quite liked what I'd done to it and decided to keep hold of it, which was absolutely their right.
Yeah. I guess that's like when you renovate a car to sell and you like it so much when it's nice and shiny, you go driving and you stay in it. So
yeah, good analogy, actually. But the reason for mentioning that was in the last, I think, 6 months of my journey there, I identified litigation finance as potentially a great market for our skill sets and services. And as a result of that, I started to meet some of the major players in the litigation finance industry, which absolutely included Nick Rolls-Davis. I can remember meeting Nick in a hotel coffee bar.
Coffee bar? Well, that's interesting. That's fairly innocent. That surprises me.
Well, it was coffee bar at that point, anyway. We did go elsewhere later on. I just thought it was a fascinating industry. So when I left the legal costs business, I did join a fund in the UK just to get my feet under the table, understand more about the industry and the dynamics around it, and then felt that, okay, I could see a hole here. And the hole that I saw was, and I like to think of the universe of claims that's seeking funding as a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is a very small area of claims that are completely investment ready and ready to receive a check from funders, and most funders would write a check for it tomorrow. They are shrink wrapped, investment ready, whatever you want to call them. And there's not much value one can add to those types of claims. At the bottom of the pyramid, a lot larger area, are claims that would probably never get funded.
Yeah.
Because they have something fundamental that is an issue with them. It could be the lack of merits. It could be problems with economics, problems with recoverability, valuation, whatever. And however clever I or anyone else is, they are never going to get funded. But in the middle of that pyramid, there's a very large area of consisting of claims that have the potential to be funded, but can't be funded right now for various reasons. And actually, it goes back to what I just said, that the work needs to be done on damages, on collectability, on getting the economics right, and a whole host of other things that we can come on to. And I felt, given I had an advisory background and had spent many years preparing companies for capital raising or for sale, that was quite a useful leverage for me, because I understood, I think quite well, how you have to prepare investment opportunities for funding sources, the amount of work you have to do to get something investment ready. And litigation finance isn't too different from that. It is, at the end of the day, an investment. A funder is putting money in to get a return. There are risks along the way, and there are ways in which you can mitigate risks. And I felt that our space was very much in the way of looking at those opportunities and seeing what the potential was, and then kind of working back from there to see what was necessary to get them to a point where they were investment ready and we could have serious discussions with funders. And as I mentioned, lots to do with we're not there to give legal advice. That's for the lawyers. That's their expertise. But everything else, the budget, the damages valuation piece, the collectability, we have a pretty big network. It's getting bigger, being part of Lexolent, I would say. And bringing those people together to get something shrink wrapped and investment ready is really the mission that we have. And I have found that methodology is very effective, very successful. It does mean that the cases that we tend to take on, the projects we tend to take on, can be quite long in gestation. It can certainly mean that we are required in many cases to we have quite a wide network of origination, so we see cases coming to us that haven't even gone to a law firm yet.
Right. Yeah.
So we're often asked to help find the law firm, find the right law firm, and do a beauty parade and do a thorough analysis of the right law firm. And that obviously comes down to skills, expertise, experience, but also in terms of taking the right risk appetites, putting budgets together that are going to work from a litigation funding point of view, and much more besides. So I suppose we like to look at ourselves as a real value-add advisory service. Inevitably, we get called brokers from time to time. I don't like the term. I don't actually think it really describes what we do particularly well. But of course, it's not our money, and we don't ever have any aspirations to raise funds of our own. We feel that with the expert funds that are out there in the market, and knowing those funds well and working with them on a regular basis, we understand where to go for the right opportunity. And I suppose that's really our key value add.
No, I mean, and it's fascinating to me that because we've interviewed a couple, Mark Keaton in London, and a couple of other people who are very much on the lawyer side, and that's one side of the window, and you're very much on the professional corporate finance advisory side. So it's looking at each other through the window, and it's fascinating to me. So litigation funding, is there any parts of it that you found particularly interesting, particularly sexy? You've gone down that rabbit hole more than others. Is it class actions? Is it exits? Is it corporate? Anything that you found particularly interesting that's got your juices flowing over the years?
Well, as I mentioned at the start, I'm a finance person by training originally, but when I realized I was going to be in the legal services space for the long run, I did something which was fairly bold, with the absolute encouragement of my wife, which was go back to my books a few years ago and do a master's in law, which I did at the City Law School in London, right. Specialising in dispute resolution and litigation. As part of that master's, I wrote my small thesis on litigation funding. That went pretty well. It was also a really interesting exercise. So I thought at the end of it, actually, I'm quite enjoying this at this sort of slightly later stage of life, quite enjoying being back at my books.
Yeah.
So I'm going to carry on. And I thought actually one of the really interesting areas of litigation finance that didn't seem to have too much literature or research around about it was portfolio finance for
Yep.
law firms.
Yep. The
And
aggregated
the
risk.
uses of it.
Yep.
Absolutely. But also the fact it's an enabler for law firms to business development, for acquisitions, for IT strategy, and you can actually monetize what's there at the moment and create capital that law firms need to grow and expand. And I just thought it would be a fascinating piece of research to look at how that's being done in the different jurisdictions, what the different regulatory issues are in those jurisdictions, but also to try and really, get into the weeds and find out what makes an ideal portfolio or what makes ideal portfolios. How do you structure a portfolio so it's likely to work? And indeed identify the ones that don't work. And that's an ongoing process. I managed to get the University of Westminster to supervise that thesis, and that process is underway. So I'm fascinated by portfolio finance for law firms. We've already done a few of those as part of our advisory role, and we're developing a methodology which I think is quite effective to get portfolios funded. So
because they're big ticket. They're big ticket items, aren't they? I mean, the legal spend attached to a 5 to 10 case portfolio, and you could be talking about counterparties, could be banks, insurance companies, authorities, all that kind of thing. So I guess and what comes into play is the funding budgets that are needed for the professional advisors, insurance. I mean, if I could ask you about insurance, are you happy to talk about the ATE and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm very happy to talk about it. I would say that I'm not a regulated broker. We work with regulated brokers where insurance comes into play. But I'm very happy to talk about it. Yes,
it's conceptually it's interesting, and I haven't actually touched upon this in any of the podcasts yet. I'm relatively new to litigation finance. I'm a couple of years into it. Nick's 20 odd years into it. You a couple of years into it, plus yourself. Now, ATE, after the event insurance, for people who may not be completely au fait with it, my very quick understanding is that you for example, as the expert would source a case, would package a case, would get a lawyers comfortable with a case, would source funding, and then you would speak to one of the specialist insurers and you would say, give us a premium price to cover our client so that if he or she loses on any of the elements, he doesn't have to. In common law, you have to pay adverse costs, and they can be huge sometimes. So what the insurers say is, okay, we will cover you. So if there's an adverse costs order of 5, 6, 7 million, well, in portfolio cases, 10, $15 million, you don't have to pay it. It's covered by the insurance. Now, I find that fascinating, but I also find the premiums that are attached to that quite eye-watering as well. So, I mean, do you have any insight into that?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, this tends to be a common law thing, although not all common law systems have adverse cost regimes. But certainly UK, Canada, DIFC, they do have adverse costs. So you're going to want adverse cost insurance because, and also from a funder's point of view, they're going to want that because if there is an adverse cost order and the claimant can't meet it, we have seen quite often the defendants going after the funders.
Yes,
and in some cases successfully. So it's a required insurance piece. Here in the US, where I'm sitting at the moment, there is very little in terms of adverse costs. You do get some attorneys' fees awards from time to time if they're written into the contract, and in some patent cases, I've seen some kind of cost awards going on, but it's nothing compared with the other jurisdictions that I mentioned. But I do think that the insurance, and it's not necessarily adverse cost insurance, but insurance is now being increasingly looked at to ensure things like portfolios, just so that the funder has some comfort that its capital is protected.
Yes.
And you don't go back that far in the market to find some of, certainly there were some UK headquartered funders who took out insurance on their own capital when investing. So, but I do think the insurance market has really taken off in the last few years. A lot of people are moving into it. I think the jury's out, to be honest, as to how much it will be used and how successful it will be. So we'll see. But I think that, at the end of the day, it's about all of us, I mean, particularly us, coming together and trying to find a way of getting a deal done. And if the only way to get a deal done is to find some kind of insurance wrapper, then that's the way you have to go. So I think that's an evolving space, but there's a lot of people are moving into it, and that normally indicates that there's a genuine market for it. Well, I mean, so I think the uses of insurance will be increasing as time goes on.
That's it. That's good. But it's evolving and it's innovative. I mean, the whole legal finance market is it's not nascent. It's been going on for a long time. But I think it's this stage of its evolution is I would say nascent. It's a growing asset class. I'm going to quote these numbers from my mind, so they're going to be wrong, but they're indicative. I think the US, or the expanded US litigation market is what, about five? Is it about a few $1 billion now? Is it $4 or $5 billion right now?
I think you're a little on the low side.
Low side, right? Okay. So
the global market, I mean, depending on who you read and what statistics you read, it's 25 to 30 billion.
Right. Okay. So like 25 to 30 billion now. As an asset class in the next 10 years, there's a lot of narrative in the press about that going up fairly exponentially, and they're expecting the global figures to double and triple in the next 10 years, because non-specialists, it's been dominated by very specialist players, large but specialist players, and now people are leaning into the market. They're not litigation finance investors, but they really like the asset class, so they're going to lean upon experts like you. They're going to ask you to advise them how best to approach the market, and they're going to invest. And at Lexolent, we are absolutely seeing that, and we have pivoted to a place. I'd like to say we originated this idea, so I will say it. And we've slightly pivoted to a place now. We are getting a lot of interest from people who are not familiar with asset class. They say, you're creating a network at Lexolent of very educated, informed people in the space. Can you put together a portfolio of advisors who can put us into this space, help us to invest money? And again, they're saying things like, talk me through portfolio investing, talk me to the spread of a fund, talk me through a direct investment into cases. And different investors are interested in different things. So there are horses for courses and choices for everyone. So Four Rivers. So Four Rivers and Lexolent, I think, are working very effectively together. It's early days. We've been doing this for nearly a year. How do you see? So what Lexolent will serve to do over the next year, it will scale itself through the electronic portal globally to connect professionals in the litigation finance world. And again, that's what we like to say. It's where money meets the law, where finance meets legal, and the professional advisors, the expertise sits in the middle of all of that. How do you see Lexolent helping the market and Four Rivers being part of that journey in the next year or two?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of our role, which I outlined earlier, I think something I'd like to add to that is that to a certain extent we do what no one else wants to do, which is the sort of running around and getting the glue together that puts everything together. So, lawyers are time poor. They only have a certain amount of time that they can spend working up a case. Funders are very time poor, same thing. Yeah. Claimants have never really done this before. So in a sense, having an advisor coming in, getting under the weeds, putting all this together makes absolute sense. At the end of the day, we want to get a deal done for everyone. That's what everyone wants. And I think that Lexolent's very significant access to capital sources in the market it goes without saying, is important. You've got your own fund now, but obviously you've also got fantastic contacts which you're developing with family offices and perhaps more niche sorts of funders that people wouldn't have heard of before, certainly wouldn't have relationships with. So there's a ton of value there. But I think in terms of the origination of the platform, as opportunities arise, and this is a self-interest comment, I think there are going to be things there that absolutely suit us, because you can see they have potential. but it does require someone to invest some time and resources in working those cases up to the point where, say, your early execution fund is happy to invest in them.
Yeah.
So I do think it's symbiotic. There's a lot of synergies there between what we're all doing. We all bring a lot of different skill sets and expertise to the table, and I think working together, we are so much stronger than working individually.
I agree entirely. The way I've seen it, as I've observed it over the last year, is that the very, very large organizations are able to buy in the resources to do a lot of this themselves. And traditionally, that's how the market's gone. What we want to do, it's a bit like the difference between the magic silver circle, excuse me, space in law and the boutique space. We want to give the boutique or the new capital in litigation funding the expertise, the connectivity, the access to resources that they would really only have historically if they were part of a giant fund. So we want to collect a cooperative of people, introduce them to four rivers, to you, to other experts, to be able to help build their participation in the market, whether they decide they love portfolio or they love class actions or they love single investments. That's their decision, but they need to have access to people that they call upon through Lexolent to be able to help them with those decisions. And it's starting to evolve pretty effectively, and we're hoping it's going to scale pretty quickly. Listen, it's been we could talk all day. We could talk all day because
I'm sure we could.
Your perspective is so fresh, and it comes at a different angle from those who I've perhaps interviewed to date, who are on the legal practice side. So it's great. And the recent US judgments, there's been 2 US judgments. One, well, there was the Packard judgment, which we'll talk about separately. And I know you have talked about that extensively on your own social media, as has Nick. Packard to one side. In the US, there have been judgments recently which have said, we're going to analyze and we're going to control the litigation funding because we don't want people being taken advantage of. We then had another judgment which said litigation funding is a type of corporate finance. It's not our job to interfere. You do the deal and you take your medicine. So it's very interesting how it's evolving, but inevitably it will grow and it will expand. And we're excited by the prospect, and we hope it will happen, and we hope it will be part of the journey where one day people can simply invest as they would invest in a stock or a trade. They'll put 5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand into something which they find quite interesting. They'll be able to track the value of that money. They'll be able to trade in and out of positions in the same way as they would on an eToro type platform.
Exchange, yeah.
Yeah, we're excited by that. I think we're a few years away from that, but we want to push quite heavily towards that. Unfortunately, our time is up, Peter. Thank you very much for your time. You've got your day. You're going to go to bed now, I guess. My day starts
fairly soon.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that's we were talking earlier about how global this whole market is now. So it's not unusual for me to be having calls with time zones that are 11, 12 hours ahead. So that's just normal.
Perfect. Let's pick it up again in six months or so. Well, we'll be interacting regularly, but let's pick it up on social media in 6 months. Let's see where we all are. Let's see how interesting the story is. And in the meantime, enjoy California.
Thank you, and enjoy Dubai. And as you say, we'll talk very soon, I'm sure.
Perfect, Peter. Thanks again.